Good morning. My name is Becky Kennard, and this is Tatum, Tucker, and Tanner. I am honored to be able to share my story with you today. Easter of 2018, we found out we were pregnant with our fourth child, Brinley Faith. My pregnancy was completely normal until my ultrasound that was done at 17 weeks. I went into the ultrasound and found out that I was dilated to 2 centimeters. My husband and I were in shock. We were terrified, and we didn't know what was going to happen. My doctor came into the room and told me he was going to admit me to the hospital that night for an emergency cerclage. Down to the hospital we went, confident that this would work. The next morning, I had the surgery, and it was successful. But about 3 hours later, it put me into labor. Thankfully, they were able to stop the contractions, and I was sent home the next day. After being home for less than 24 hours, I went into labor again. My husband rushed me to the hospital, and I was admitted. After 2 days, they were able to slow and eventually stop the contractions. The doctors decided I would need to remain on strict hospital bed rest until Brinley was born. I was shocked, but I was willing to do anything for my daughter. The next day, I was 18 weeks, and the unimaginable happened. My water broke. We could not believe this was even possible. I was only 18 weeks. The doctors told me the next 48 hours were critical, and I would either go into labor or get an infection. 48 hours came and went, and I was fine. I laid flat in my hospital bed for another 5 weeks. I turned 23 weeks, and we were beyond excited because this is what my hospital considered viability. The next day, I went into labor. I was in labor for almost a week before my doctors called an emergency C-section. At 23 weeks and 5 days, I delivered Brinley Faith on September 14th, 2018, and she was perfect. The NICU team did a wonderful job. When I went to see her in the NICU for the first time, she was so tiny and so full of life. The nurses kept telling me she was so feisty and was definitely going to be a fighter. My husband stayed with her and took care of her while I tried to recover from my emergency C-section. That night, right before he was going to bed, things took a turn. Brinley was no longer responding to her breathing tube, and they could not figure out why. 20 minutes later, I got the text to come quick. Brinley was crashing. By the time I got down there, the doctors told me they had done everything they could, but they were not able to regulate her breathing. They asked me to hold her in hopes my body would regulate hers. I was able to hold my little peanut for the first time, and I prayed to God that this would work. After a few hours, Brinley did not respond, and the doctors decided it was time to remove her from life support. I don't remember it happening, but I prayed a miracle would come. We decided to have her baptized, and then we took her back to my room. My husband and I snuggled her for 4 hours off of life support before I finally felt her take her final breath. On September 15th, our daughter Brinley Faith went to heaven. We were numb. We were in shock. We felt as though the world had ended. The nurses gave us this little box with a hat for her, a little dress, her handprints, and everything that had belonged to her in her short little life. Inside were these pink bracelets that so many of you have on with the name Empty Cradle on them. I immediately looked at my husband and said, "What jerk names their charity Empty Cradle?" Which Rachel and I now laugh about. But for some reason, my husband searched the name on Facebook and found Empty Cradle. He sent a message, and Rachel responded immediately. She offered to have someone come from the Mother to Mother program to speak with us. Within hours of this message, Justin Terlaga was in our hospital room from the Mother to Mother program. Obviously, he's not a lost mom, but he is a lost dad. And he was the answer to our prayers. I still remember what he said when he walked in. I'm here for whatever you need. I can listen. I can talk. I can answer questions. I can stay for 5 minutes, or I can stay for 5 hours. This was exactly what we needed. Tyler and I had no clue what step to take next. The hospital had so many questions for us. They wanted to know what funeral home, what we were going to do with our daughter, and what our plans were moving forward. I had never planned a funeral before, and I thought I would never have to bury my child. Justin was so open and honest with us. He shared his experience with his daughter, and he gave us so much information. Tyler and I thought that we were this very rare exception. So when he told us that we were 1 in 4, we were completely shocked. Those first few days, Tyler slept constantly, and I couldn't sleep at all. But Justin assured us this was normal. We truly felt like we were going to die. It hurt to breathe. We couldn't eat. We just wanted our daughter back. Then her funeral came. We were so afraid that no one would want to come, so we only invited immediate family. After it was over and everyone left, we were alone. We were supposed to go back to being a normal family again, but we weren't. Brindley was gone. Through this whole time, Justin continued to help us. He would talk or text whenever we needed. Then we decided it was time to attend our first Empty Cradle meeting in October because we needed support. Our families were great, but they just didn't understand what we were going through. Our first meeting was so hard, but it was so healing. I cried harder than I ever had before because I was so worried someone was going to forget my daughter. Then another mom, who's now my dear friend, said, I will never forget Brindley. That meant the world to me. That night, I met several lost moms that have now become some of my very best friends. Every month, I truly needed that meeting. And in between, I would text with my lost mom friends whenever I needed support, and they have always been there for me. We are now 14 months after losing Brindley, and my grief has changed. I no longer feel as though I'm going to die, but that it is this backpack that I always carry around with me. It's always there, but it's not as heavy. I am no longer angry with God. I will always want my daughter back, and I will always wonder why this had to happen to us. But I'm here to tell you that I am living again. If it were not for Empty Cradle and Justin, I'm not sure I would be here. See, we are all a part of this club, a club that no one wants to be a part of. But let me tell you, I am so thankful for my Empty Cradle family. If you have recently lost, I am here to tell you, it gets better. We will always be here to support you and your family, and I will never forget your baby. Rest in peace, Brindley Faith. We love you so much.